the California Audio Show with Constantine. And tell me a little bit about the show and maybe what makes it a little bit different than some of the other shows like on the East Coast, if there is a difference.
Yeah, sure, of course. Thank you so much, Tom. And of course, this is a West Coast show. And we have the weather here. And it's right, this time of year, right now, actually, we have some cool weather, which is nice. And also, the hotel is a little bit smaller. It's more concentrated, more compact. And then we have 19 rooms, which is not a whole lot of room, but also ensures every exhibitor will get the most attention, that attendees won't have to rush from room to room. Yeah, so that's why we have many name brands coming to the show. And big shows are good. Big shows are, the spotlights and all the stardoms and all that. But big shows, sometimes you always have everybody just clamoring to the first 20 rooms or 30 rooms and out of 150 rooms. And so sometimes that puts some small companies at disadvantage, and even big companies can see that. So coming to the California Audio Show, we in California, what we're trying to do is, at least what I'm trying to do is make the show in the environment which is not too big, not too small, and we still have 20-some rooms to go to fill up. So the show has room to expand, but not too much. Once we get to over 40 rooms, then we'll stop the registration for exhibitors. We want to maintain the show to be, exactly the right size, so that all the exhibitors get all the exposures they can get, whereas they cannot get at bigger shows. So the show is called California Audio Show because it was founded in 2010, and at that time there was no show in California. We were taking a huge risk, and so we're thinking about what name to get. We're in California, just California Audio Show, to make it just straightforward. Yeah, so that's how the name came to be. And then the next year, 2020, will be our 10th anniversary. We are planning something big. The reason is not the 11th year, but the 10th year, because we took a pause in 2016. I got married in 2015.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. So on behalf of the wife's family, not just her, I had to take a rest in 2016. So that's why 2020 is the 10th anniversary.
I noticed that when you watch YouTube, some of the shows have a big exhibit hall and other shows have, usually even the exhibit halls have some rooms. But this show is just rooms primarily, right, in the hotel room. There's no exhibit hall where you have little tables.
Yeah, actually, this hotel, they do have exhibit halls. And for the first 2 years, in 2017, 2018, we did have another building open as well. And we have some big seminar rooms, big ballrooms, and that was fun. But that also is higher price in that regard. So this year we're trying to see if we scale down just a little bit, make everything in the same building, which is a 3-story building, and still have very nice sound rooms. And we want to see how the public will react to it, how the industry will like it, and it seems fine, because these rooms they are very generously proportioned. They have like 8-foot ceilings, and then 18.5 feet long. It's 13.5 feet wide, and the walls are very solid because the hotel was built in the 60s. So this is a very solidly built hotel with very good sound rooms. And all the exhibitors that were in the rooms, they all came back and saying that this is one of the best rooms they have. And you can read about these comments online.
Well, yeah, the New York Audio Show was similar. They were in a hotel room. So I was wondering if it was a trend to get away from the exhibit halls just because of the crowding or whatever. It's a different animal. It seems like if you're really into the audio, it seems like you go into the room and listen. You can't really hear anything in in an exhibit hall. And the point is to sit down and listen and try it. Most people want to hear what the difference is between this or hear something that's difficult for them to access. So the rooms, I think, are the most important part. It's interesting, though. Was there any kind of theme that you came up with when you were choosing the people to exhibit here? For example, some people in the industry are a little concerned that the high-end audio is getting, going over towards the extreme and leaving all the people that are on a budget out, and so some people want to focus more on bringing people in. Is there anything like that going on with the show as far as your concept behind it?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Tom. For this show, for the California Audio Show, we do have some extreme sound rooms. For example, we have the Mount Logan downstairs, the ballroom number 3. We have Audio Federation in ballroom number 5, and these are all extreme sound rooms. And then we have something in between. For example, we have Sound Lab just next door here, and the speakers is only $25,000 a pair. And then the technology is proven, and Dr. West has been doing this since the 70s, so it's very mature technology. And we also have something that's for people who's more budget-minded, like wireless sound is also at this show. And as you know, that technology is very advanced, but then they reduce the production costs, and so that the product is more affordable. And yet there's a performance envelope there that's not diminished. And so, we have a wide, cross-section of what the industry has to offer.
Yeah, some of the bigger companies like Rega, for example, they have kind of like an entry-level line as well. So it's good to have not just exclusive, high-end big horns and, room filling. Because some people these days don't have just a separate room just for their audio system in their house. But, the thing about this show coming at this time, is there any reason for having it right now in the middle of the summer? I mean, I think it's a good time, but anything behind that?
Well, that's a good question, too. When we first did the show in 2010, we started planning around March, and we're thinking we need 3 months, 4 months to get it ready, hence July and August. And ever since, we try to stick with the same schedule because we have good comments from exhibitors and attendees saying that this is the time they can, actually attend the show. But of course, nowadays, we have an onslaught of shows before our show, and that kind of like absorbs some of the energy from the show as well. But, competition is always there, no matter where you go. So we would just try to, work with that and progress. And, yeah.
Are you doing anything special to the rooms? Because I know I've talked to a couple of the exhibitors, and one of the excuses they say is some of them say, this is just a regular old outlet. We're not going to bring any of our special, treatment in or our cables. We're just going to do what we can with this room. And other ones say, other ones bring a lot of their gear. Is there anything special? You said this old building about the outlets and the power available.
Yeah, the power is essentially is pretty much industry standard in the hotel. It's pretty stable. But what I want to mention to you, Tom, is that the walls of this hotel, is very solid since it was built in the 60s. So, this is old-style hotels. Usually, the material is not that advanced. They have to use more fundamental materials. And also, this show, ever since the first year, we bring in the Acoustic Sciences Corporation, famous for the ASC tube traps used in recording studios and homes. So they are in the show every year, and they supply as many exhibitors requests as possible to help with the room acoustics.
Yeah, because that's kind of one of the things that some of them use it to their advantage, and then some of them use it as an excuse, like I was trying to say. But it's interesting, and you can go to these shows, and you could meet the actual. That's the good thing about high-end audio is you can meet the designers, and you can meet. It's a small staff, so you can actually meet the actual people. But how is, generally speaking, because I've been gone for quite a while, 20 years, how is the overall, in your opinion, the overall high-end audio market and like the whole audio world these days? I mean, in your opinion?
Tom, that's a very loaded question. But I think you can look at this from different viewpoints. First of all, the brick and mortar stores are always very good, always very helpful. When you have people who can just walk in and ask questions, and you have a knowledgeable staff that can answer questions, help them set up the systems, and introduce them to the high-end audio world, that's always good. But then, of course, nowadays, the way you listen to music, we do listen to music back in the 80s and 90s is different than people these days, younger generation. Okay, for example, I don't have a gaming system in my home. I don't know. I'm not so much as about how an earthquake would feel like, or when an F-16 crashes into my sound room. Not like that, but more into like musical, the timbre of the instruments, the accuracy of the tonality. Okay, and then the substance of the music, of the instruments being played. Does it sound real, or does it sound dull and dragged behind, or does it sound very fast, very natural? Okay, and so I think the way for the audio industry to progress really is the first level is to recruit more younger talents, younger people. We view a retail store, hire more younger people, train them, so the other young people can relate. And if you are for example, an importer or a manufacturer, okay, at least have a staff like the public relations, or marketing, younger staff, then other people can relate to. I mean, even at my age, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but at my age.
Well, you remember the 80s and 90s, so.
Yeah, I mean, if I call into a company, let's say going to a manufacturer, okay, if the person answering the phone is a young person, I feel rejuvenated. I feel like I can talk to them. If they are knowledgeable, if they are the right fit for the industry, meaning that they chose for that job, they have the patience, they have the understanding of technology, and they have the passion just talk to you about the products. I think that's very important. So this talks about the succession and the evolution of the industry as a whole. I think we do just fine. Just give enough time for the information to be disseminated, for the industry to understand what it takes. Because what I'm saying here is just my observation. But if that is the truth, if it holds any salt, okay, then everybody is going to see the same thing sooner or later. The evolution is going to take place, is on a collective level. So I have faith. We just need to persist.
Yeah, everybody thought turntables were dead, and now and vinyl, and now it's coming back. And some of the younger people are interested in the things you said. They're trying to listen to the timbre, but they grew up with the MP3 player, so they didn't grow up with that sound. So it's interesting. I'm hopeful too that but they need to be introduced into it. So that's why I was a little worried that there's not so many, at least in the East Coast, there's not so many brick and mortar stores. You have to go to someone's house or make an appointment or something. Whereas here, there seems to be a little bit more. But so I have hope too. Yeah, I mean, and you're doing pretty well. How's the show doing overall? Do you have are you expecting a big? We won't know until tomorrow, I guess. But you're expecting a pretty good crowd.
Oh yes, historically, every year at the show we have almost half of people that's just at the door. They just buy tickets last minute, and the other half just buy tickets over 6 months before the show. Within that period, they buy tickets online. So yeah.
Well, thanks for talking to me, and I wish you good luck. It's hot here. I'm getting used to it from the East Coast. I guess I got a storm now, but I mean, like I said, I grew up with high-end audio in the Bay Area, so I feel more comfortable here, and I really hope that some of the people, put aside their MP3 players and, sit down and actually listen to the music. But it's going to be a little bit of a culture shift.
It will happen because in every generation, there's always a percentage that's very, how shall I say, they look at the high-end audio, they emphasize music, the quality of music. It's in every generation. But these people, they will come around as long as we're still around, they will try to, market our products and market the industry. Just for example, hiring more younger generation people to represent the industry, to get some young blood in, to get their energy into the industry, and then slowly let them take over, and we'll do just fine.
Yeah, we'll see what the crowd looks like and explain it. But again, thanks a lot for talking to me. Okay, great.
You're listening to the UnCommonCore podcast with your host Thomas Howell.
First, tell me your name and then the company.
So my name is Tim Link, and I'm with Acoustic Sciences Corporation, also known as ASC.
Okay, and I remember when I was into high-end audio, I worked at a little shop back in the late 80s, early 90s, right when it was really popular. And when these guys, I think, first came out, these guys were the ASC tube traps. And the controversy was, what is this? Is this magic? Is this voodoo? Is this BS? What is going on with this? And then it passed the mustard. Almost everybody said this stuff works. And now what is it, 20 years later or so, and you're still in business and probably have grown a lot since then, right?
Well, we're still going. I think the company's been through ups and downs, but still making them and still at the same location in Eugene. I think they, I have to tell you, I'm new there. I've been, less than a year. But the history I understand is it started in Eugene, Oregon, and it started with a shop called Bradford's Hi-Fi, and they had Magnapan speakers there. And they were asking for some kind of a trap that would go behind the Magnapan to catch that bounce off the back wall.
What year was this?
This, I hate to give exact years, but this was in the 80s, I believe.
Right, because I think that's when it came out, as I recall.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Late 80s.
Right. And so Art Noxon was a acoustic engineer, been trained at the University of Oregon. And he said, well, I can see if I can come up with something for you. This is a story he told me. And so he came up with these tubes and put them back there, and they were a hit. And said they work. And And so basically the demand went up, and he didn't have this dream, say, I'm going to make tubes and send them out in the world. Somebody asked for them, and so he made it, and people said they work, and then he got more and more of them out the door. And so, I should really let him tell you the deep story, but that's basically how it got started, was Magnepan speakers at a local store in Eugene, a hi-fi store at Bradford's, which was always my favorite store growing up because I was into hi-fi from the beginning. But I never noticed the tube traps in there. I didn't know that was part of the process, and they actually had some of our other products in there over the years. And a lot of it disappeared for me because, as a guy that was uninitiated at the time, I just heard good sound in there. I didn't know what was going on, but I was interested in buying speakers and hi-fi equipment, and acoustics hadn't occurred to me at that point in time yet. So,
yeah, the thing is about these they're called traps, and they're round, and you have different sizes. You have larger ones depending upon what kind of frequencies you need to control in the room. But back in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a lot of things that, like I said, people were suspicious about the snake oil. I remember the VPI brick and all this other stuff. But these have, from what I recall, they started in the hi-fi rooms for audiophiles, and then they've been introduced into the studio. And I remember talking to people that worked, like a guy I knew who worked at a mastering lab, and I was like, we don't use that kind of stuff. We have other things, but now this stuff, they have big panels and things like that because they don't have to worry about how it looks or anything. But now these are in the professional recording studios as well, right?
That's correct. Yeah, there's a product called a Studio Trap, which we have some here, and they're a little smaller in diameter typically, and they have it looks like a musician's music stand base on the bottom, a 3-prong base that screws on, and then you can move them around quickly, and they are usually arranged in what's called a quick sound field arrangement, so you can go into any room and make a recording. And what's great about them is by creating this quick recording space, almost like a booth, the musician can hear themselves sing when they're making or play, whatever they're doing, and then listen to the recording, and it sounds pretty much like what they expected. And that's not what they're used to when they have to go into unfamiliar environments. It's usually quite frustrating. So that's been a very successful product, and I know that they're just going out. I see tons of those going out of the factory all the time. So yeah, the recording and the huge names in music are using those all the time, and it's a great product that it just works amazingly well. And the good news is it's not snake oil. We can actually make very easily measurements before and after. It's quite easy to hear the difference, and it's quite easy to measure it.
Yeah, the thing is also, now a lot of people who start doing their little recording studios as well, in the home recording studio business, I don't think they've quite tapped into it yet. But the thing about the tube traps is you put them in the corner, and that's for the physics, that's the best place for them. At least that's where they started, in the corner. And people have these acoustics on the wall. Now, do you compete with and it's pretty ugly. I don't like it. I used to have all that foam on the wall, and now whenever I do it, there's companies that, like you, they hide it behind material. But do you work with the Sonics kind of foam that goes on the wall, or do you not need that once you start using the ASC?
Well, the ASC products can replace those, but a lot of our clients, I've noticed, will have them in conjunction. They can work together, and you can get good results using them together. Usually what ours does is a little different than what the other ones do. And so sometimes I've had people tear them all out, or sometimes I keep some of them. So like the foams, for instance, just typically don't cover the lower frequencies as well. And so you're going to lower the reflection of high frequencies, and that might be what the room needs, in which case they're perfectly useful, but they can also overdeaden a room if you're not careful. And so that's something that, all of our products, we make similar panels that are thin for similar purpose to diffuse. And
you do that now. You make the panels now.
But they're all voiced very carefully. It's a lot of testing to make sure that they don't over dampen and that they don't, cause dead spots and live spots to make the room could sound worse if you do that kind of thing. I think a lot of people have had that experience. I had it when I first got into acoustics on my own, over deadening a room. It's like, wow, it sounds horrid. It's like, so then you find out what did I do wrong, and it's like, well, you didn't allow some of that high frequency to bounce back, because usually it's easy to absorb those highs. It's not as easy to get down lower. and that's where the room needs it the most usually. Actually, you need a balance. So getting
Yeah.
the balance right is the magic. And the tube is really great because it really does get down low, and that's its secret. And also being a round shape like it is, it acts as a high frequency diffuser as well, reflector diffuser, and it's adjustable too. So you can turn it and make it so that it absorbs the highs if you need more of that, or you can turn it around so that the high frequency reflector is coming into the room, and now you've got diffusion and some reflection back into the room, but you still have the low frequency absorption. So it's very tunable, and that's a big part of its success. And like you said, the corner is a great place because that's where you get a pressure front. The pressure builds up in the corners for the low frequencies, and these are a pressure device. So some acoustic absorbers require air motion, and they absorb that motion as it goes by. But this doesn't need that. It actually needs pressure to build up because it creates its own motion because it's a pressure chamber. So as the pressure outside changes, you create a differential between the inside and outside of the trap. And that's where the friction happens, because then the air tries to move into the trap, and that's where the energy gets absorbed. So that can go quite low.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I worked in this little shop in San Francisco, the owner decided to make a acoustic room, and so he put like a double wall, and he put the Armstrong sound absorption stuff. And by the time he was done, and he put the stuff that goes under the carpet as a cover. And by the time he was done, you walk into the room and your voice disappeared. And and it was weird. It was like
anechoic. Yeah, and I've heard a lot of people. I've never been in an anechoic chamber. I'd love to try it, but I've heard a lot of people say it's really disconcerting.
Yeah.
And some people have been lucky enough to actually hear good stereo speakers played in an anechoic chamber, and they say it sounds terrible. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to know that. We often talk about the room is a problem. It's always a problem, but it's actually a piece of the playback, and if it's done right, it helps. And this is something that Art could go and he could explain, because he's got tons of experience with it, of fixing rooms where they've got the balance off. So 2-channel stereo in a room, the room is a piece of the playback equipment. It's really critical, and if you take it away completely, it can be really awful. So yeah, getting that balance right, where you get some ambience off the room and you get some extra, you can control the stereo width. You can make it narrower or wider, and you can create a more sense of envelopment or a more closed feeling. And it's also just personal tastes. We have some clients that like a room that's much more deadened, much more direct. And they measure excellent. They're very, very clear that way. And other people like a little more ambience. And I can usually see it. If they'll run some of our test signals and send us back the recording, I'm starting to see the preferences. Some people like it a little different than others, or they can tolerate some things more than others. So it's an interesting balance. But Art, doing it for 40 years or more, however long he's been doing this now, he has gotten a pretty good taste. I mean, as good as anybody in the industry for tuning a room. It's because there's an art and a science to it. And
well, I have a lot of questions, and I don't want to keep you forever, but the tube traps also, you can introduce them to the room a little at a time. So you don't have to, and which is good. I mean, you don't have to make a huge investment. You can buy a couple for the corner, or one or two, and then add on to that and tune your room. And I think that's one of the advantages. Now, a couple other things I wanted to say. When I was in the New York Audio Show, I noticed that you guys weren't there. I was in New York. I did one in the East Coast.
Okay.
And I don't think there were any of the. I mean, some people had some room acoustic, but they didn't have you guys. Why not? How come you guys are only here on the West Coast?
Well, the easy answer is it's closer. That's what I would assume. So I think I don't know exactly how that decision got made, or which shows we can make it to and which ones we can't. So I think we'd like to be there, and I think we could really help. And
you could definitely help, because some of a lot of them, people complained, and they said, like, some of them calculated, well, we're in this type of a room and this is all we can do. And other one, but you are giving these guys the tube traps that they need if they want them. Is that right?
Yeah, we have them, at least they can load them for the show on the room, and they can buy them if they want, and then we also can provide people that know that they want some. This is a good chance. If they're coming to the show, they can save on the shipping, take some home, and we've got show specials. So all the tubes we have here are potentially available if somebody wants a really good deal and doesn't want to pay shipping and has room in their car or their truck to take them home with them. So yeah, we intend to take. We've had some shows apparently where they've all been taken, but that usually doesn't happen because people aren't ready to haul them. But
Well, it's great. It's great. That's what I was saying. I was surprised that you weren't at the other show because that's exactly what they need is to tune the rooms, because all the little square rooms, it's not made for this kind of thing. But
Right. We have some. We don't make it ourselves to every show, but we have a lot of our. Speaker manufacturers and some of the dealers that go to shows have tube traps, and they'll order them before the shows. So I know that that's going on. So I do look through the pictures of the different shows, and I see when tube traps are there. I'm always curious who's using them, and we see some, and it's like, wow, we don't know who they are, we don't know where they got those traps, but those are definitely too. So I know that they're getting around out there, and some people do bring them to the shows with them because they know they need them. But at these shows where they know we're coming, they can rely on us, so they don't have to haul their own tubes.
yeah, I don't think. I mean, there's homemade knockoffs, but I haven't seen a whole lot of other companies. I guess you must have the patenting down or something on it because it's very recognizable, and you're the only company now that does anything like this. Is that right? You're still the only ones that are kind of doing this sort of a thing?
I've seen some similar products, but yeah, exactly like this, and then all the different sizes that we make, I don't see anybody else doing it. So it may be that it's not understood why they work or why they should use them. And the story I've heard is we didn't actually understand at first why they work so good. And Art worked really hard to study that and understand what it is that made them so effective, and then to capitalize on that and say, how can we make them better? And so that's why the different sizes came out. The first ones were pretty small. They didn't go all that deep. So these bigger ones, these are really quite large now compared to the original size, and they just work better that way. And then we have even really big ones if people want to go really deep and to get a lot of absorption and have a larger room. It turns out that by going too large, you can flatten out the dispersion characteristics for the highs. And so these sizes are kind of getting around optimal. It looks like this 16-inch to 13-inch diameter seems to really just kind of nail it for a lot of rooms. And so, yeah, and other companies have their own ideas, and so I do look at other acoustic companies, and they have products that certainly work, and they work differently. So.
Yeah, they don't. Some of the ones in the homemade ones that they're just they're not tuned like yours. It's just chicken wire and some foam padding and whatnot. And I think one of the problems is that when you look at yours, you don't really see all the engineering that goes into it. They're like, I could do that myself, but you really can't. And like you said, it's a lot of engineering has gone into it, and they work. I recommend them. I would always get them for my rooms, and I think it's one of the better products out there. Like I say, it's no snake oil involved in this one.
Right. It's the sciences. I mean, I love the name Acoustic Sciences because it really is a pretty solid science. I mean, you can see what it's doing. You can explain what it's doing. We've taken them to the big acoustic chambers where they do the measurements and gotten the curves on them, and they pretty much measured as we expected. So it's a really well understood principle, at least for acoustic engineers, for average listeners, knowing that the room has a problem isn't so well known, and understanding why the trap works. I think there's still some. I don't know that every audiophile out there understands it or knows about it. And so I'm still getting new customers that say, hey, I just read about this and I want to try this. I know Wilson, for instance, has it in their manual. It says if your speakers don't sound good, don't call us, call Acoustic Sciences. And so they call us. And so I this guy down here in California recently wanted to try some, and he was a little skeptical, but I said, well, we don't have hardly anybody return them. And so he started, like you said, you can start small and add more. I said, well, this should be a minimum. We can recommend a minimum amount for the room that's going to do something noticeable. It's like you got to put enough salt in the soup that you can take, okay, I'm tasting it. It's better now. If you put too little in, you might not notice. But, it usually takes 2 to 4 traps. Usually 4 traps. 4 of these 13s is enough to really do something. You put 2 in each front corner. And, and I get the call back. And, I'm never worried, like, oh, he's going to call back and say, I don't really hear anything. Man, this isn't working for me. That never happens. They're always like, wow, that really works. They just weren't expecting it. And I got to try it. I got to have some put in my room at my house. And this is just, a low-end system. I was just trying them really quick. It was quick experiments, quick measurements, and instantly heard it. It's like, oh, that's great. It's like that tightens up the bass. And it's a way I didn't even know it needed to happen. It's just like once you hear it, you realize, okay, that's a lot better. And then you wonder how much more, eventually there's a point of diminishing returns where you've pretty much got the room where it needs to be. But you can go a long ways, I think. You can keep hearing it as you keep damping the bass because it's usually a pretty big problem. And
you tune it. You tune it up. I think one of the problems these days, there's a lot of people say the problems these days, but people psych themselves up. They watch a lot of YouTube channels and there's these people who have opinions. But the whole thing with high-end audio is you just gotta sit down. You can believe what you want, but really it's like tasting the food.
Yeah.
You could only, I mean, it's nice to watch the food programs, right? But it's really not the same as eating it, because it could look great and it cannot taste that good, and vice versa. So you, with the high-end audio and these things included, you really have to listen, and then those are the people that are sold. And all the hype disappears, and it's like, okay, now why do they sound good? Why is there a difference? And you believe there shouldn't be one, and now you really start knowing what the science is behind it.
Yeah.
Right. So what is the entry level, and what are the different prices? And I'll let you go because you're setting up and you guys are busy. But what type of money are people going to be spending on this?
Well, for a typical room, with shipping and the entire kit to get assuming it's a room with some good equipment, it's medium sized, I'd say a couple $1,000s will get a very noticeable improvement. And if you want to go to like a reference level room, we call it a 2C 3D room, where you get the 2-channel 3-dimensional effect, that can be 10 to 20,000, sometimes more if it's a big room. That can get you into, maybe I've seen someone go up to 30, 40 for some really high-end systems. And that's going to get you top notch. You're going to be approaching the minimum. You
said you had a low-end room. Like you said, I didn't have a fancy thing, and I heard it on my system.
Yeah.
Is there a point where your system isn't good enough, and then it's good enough, or they're would you say you have to have a $5,000, a $10,000 system before one or two traps is going to matter, or is it really just the room? Is there anything like a formula like that you can go with?
I would say that if your system goes, I mean, this sounds funny, but does it play below 200 hertz? Can you hear notes down there? It's going to sound better in almost every domestic room if you put a few traps in there. And like 4 traps is going to work even on something you bought from Best Buy for under $1,000. It's going to tighten up. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. I had a bedroom system that was just used for playing some games and listening to some music and watching some movies at low volume. And it had a couple subs in there. So I was kind of serious about it, but it was all, I didn't want to spend a lot of money on that system because I never can crank it up in there. It's a situation. And I thought, well, let's see what this does, because we have these traps. I just take them home and try them, experiment with them. And so I put them in there, and it's like, oh, you can just hear it right away. And now it does matter, if you turn it up more, you can hear it better. There's no question about that. So if you're down at low enough volume, or if it's a real near field system, you're just sitting real close and you're listening quietly, you might not hear it as much. I notice as I turn mine up, that's when I really notice it more, because it's like, wow, now I can get, the cello. Like if I'm listening to a movie and it's got some cellos and it's got some lower bass instruments coming in, and I turn them up, and it's usually it gets all muddy, so I turn it back down, and oh, now it's not doing that. It's going right along. So even these inexpensive speakers, if they're well engineered, are better than you think. If you hear the room behaving better, you realize, oh, they actually do clear. They're clearer. You can hear. They're very enjoyable. So that's been an interesting thing for me. I think it's interesting. I'm excited to be here because I want to hear what this. I haven't actually had some access to some high-end equipment because Eugene, I get to hear Magnepans but that's what they have set up. But yeah, I have always believed that you can keep hearing the difference as it goes up to astronomical prices, and you can hear it get better, but you can go to something very basic and still hear very good sound. And so that's the interesting thing about it. It's like it can be very enjoyable, and it's not that you can't hear the difference, but that tube trap seems like it's fixing such a weak link in almost every system that at any level, a sort of I would say, yeah, if you're just listening off the speaker on your iPhone, yeah, the tube traps aren't going to help. There's nothing going on there much below 200 hertz. But if you got a room that has, or even a standard set of bookshelf speakers that cuts off at 100 hertz, you're still going to hear that range from about 700 below clearing up. You can just hear that speed and that better articulation in the room. It's definitely worth it. It's a good investment. I would do that. The question is, should you do this? And I had a question like this recently. So I had a guy in Australia setting up a room, and he is. It's a very high-end room. He has a TAD reference ones, and he was setting up some tube traps. He also got some active tube traps from another manufacturer in Switzerland, I think, or Sweden. I can't remember exactly where. But he asked us a question. He said, I'm going to buy this reference digital analog converter. Is this room good enough to hear that converter? And, with all these traps in here. So it was kind of this question, even if I trap this out, is it good enough for that converter? And the thing is, I don't actually know. You'd have to try it out. But I get the impression that you can often, even in a bad room, you can hear a better speaker, over a lesser speaker. And I think it goes the other way too. Even in a good room, you can still hear the improvements in even a low end system. So.
Right. That's a lot of people have that concern. It's like, well, I listen to this kind of music that comes out of concert speakers. Is it gonna, I listen to loud rock maybe. Is it really gonna matter that much? Or, is it gonna matter? Is it gonna be worth the money? Yeah. And I think these are one of the things that's worth trying out. If you go into an empty room, for example, you could hear the acoustics in it. It's weird. And then you go into a room with furniture. So this is just evidence that most people can probably relate to, that the room acoustics do matter. And to how much is going to depend upon the room. But if you have a system that I think that's a couple grand or even $1,000 or $1,500, it's worth making a little bit of an investment. How much is one of these cost? How much is like one 13-inch wide tube trap cost?
So they are $499, is that right? 13 by 3. That's isothermal. That's our newest, best design that they actually perform like a 16 used to, pretty close. And there's a show special right now for $299 if you pick one up at the show. But yeah, $399, and 4 of those should make any room, any normal-sized listening room, quite noticeably better. A lot of people would be super happy with just 2 in each front corner. Almost always works. I've at 99.9% of the time. It's going to be better by a very noticeable margin.
Right. Okay. Well,
I've listened to some people. One thing, I've had a chance to go to some people's houses where, especially if you're really familiar with your room and the weaknesses, and this was a pretty big room, and I just came over to this guy's house and we put in 1 in each corner, 1 13 by 3. And I honestly, not being familiar with the system, didn't notice a whole lot of difference, but he noticed a lot. So, because he was very familiar with this system. And so hearing the improvement, even with just 2, he was like, they're staying. So he had to talk to his wife and they had to work out the color
well, it's interesting that you say that he had to talk to his wife, because there's that factor also. A lot of audiophiles where they're into it, but their friends are not into it and their family members are not into it. And you start getting a little bit too crazy, obviously, and they're like, I think you're going overboard with this kind of thing. And the acoustic panels are ugly and they take up a lot of space, but this is something you could kind of hide and integrate into the room, and it's kind of like a sleeper way of improving your system, I think,
Yeah, and some people object to the tubular shape, and so we have a square one now, and it's right there, and that might work for some people better, and those are actually no more expensive, and they work quite well. So exact same principle. It's just the only thing they don't do as well is the diffusion, because they don't have that curved surface. But still great bass trapping, and if you're into squares and you don't like circular shapes in your room, then the
circular is a lot easier to hide, and it's a lot more aesthetic than having your house look like a recording studio, especially with your friends and the family members that aren't into it so much.
In the corners it has a sort of a column look to it, and it looks nice. Where if you get lots and lots of them, you start looking like a forest of traps. That works great, but some people, that's not going to pass the wife test. So or friend test or anybody else that they're going to say, what's going on in here? But.
Okay, well, thanks a lot and I'm glad you're here, because there's a couple companies that I wanted to introduce the audience to, and ASC is definitely one of them. I mean, it's something people should be aware of with their once they get into high end, like with cables or like room acoustics is one of the key elements. Yeah. So
I'm really happy to talk about this, and I totally agree with you. I think it's a super product, and it's a super value, and it's hard to find any other single improvement that's more profound, I think.
Yeah, and it's going to affect everything in the system. One last quick question. Not all audio stores sell this product. So can you order it online, or how's that work? If somebody wants them or wants to listen to them, where do they go?
Well, there are some dealers, and we have them listed on our website, but mostly we sell direct online. And so it is sort of a try it, based on other people's experience. And, we do have a return policy. If you don't really hear something and you just don't like it, we hardly ever have it happen. So we're not worried about returns. It just never happens. People get them and they keep them. So
fantastic. Well, thanks a lot. And your name one more time for everybody?
My name is Tim Link.
Tim Link, and you're the link to better sound, right?
That's right.
You've been listening to the UnCommonCore podcast with Thomas Howell. I'm Satoko Smith. Thank you for listening.